Origin Gents, this latest video from Cappy, US plans to topple Iran by hitting this weak spot. Yeah, it's a new Cappy video, it's about Iran. It's gonna be awesome. Yeah, Cappy, I've been watching Cappy for a long time now, since he was in Task and Purpose. His videos are really interesting, highly made. It was like, you know, it's not a daily update type videos. It's like he takes the time to make his videos. So yeah, I don't know what specific weak spot, or like this is gonna be Star Wars things hitting the vent, or like you know, like Top Gun thing, Top Gun Maverick, which also was hitting the specific spot. Is this how it's gonna be? I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. Let's do this one.
Tharallah Headquarters in Iran that you've probably never heard about, but it's the command that's responsible for brutally killing as many as 30,000 Iranian protesters in January, so they suck pretty hard. Their job is to suppress rebellions and restore control of the country, so in order to topple the Islamic Republic regime, you need to knock this system out. It's the Death Star vent weakness point. The Tharallah Headquarters acts as the entire internal security brain when unrest hits. It's the most critical cog in the apparatus to suppress the Iranian people. The Chinese Communist Party recently sent them cyber warfare technology that allowed them to instantly shut down communications and the internet access across the whole country. That's
China, country for the people, right? For the people's freedom. China's come to the rescue.
what the Tharallah Headquarters is responsible for. But the United States military has a counter operation to this that's legitimately insane. On the mountainous western border of Iran, American operatives move silently at night through gaps in the security to smuggle in a solution.
Oh boy, here I go toppling again.
We'll see how it's part of America's plan to topple Iran.
This video's partner, Supremacy World War III, is how I de-stress when I'm in the bubble.
He's gonna talk about Starlink, right? Like I remember, like they were like smuggling Starlink in. Elon Musk, who's not a government, somehow his technology is instrumental to military warfare. That's just insane. His Starlink system. I mean, people have a lot of opinion about Elon Musk. But you have to acknowledge that sometimes his ideas are like too much there, right? But even military is like, yeah, we're gonna use this. People go to original page link from there, support this channel. Cap is really good, man.
Back to the episode.
These US agents moved thousands of Starlink terminals into Iran ahead of strikes, according to the Wall Street Journal. This opens up communication for the resistance movement and allows them to organize meeting locations and avoid crackdowns even if the internet is shut down again. Iraq, Turkey, Syria, all of these countries on Iran's border have US operatives on the ground, and they are familiar with the key smuggling routes into the country.
But the smugglers face real risks of being shot by border guards. Fortunately, US operators absolutely mog Iranian ones. This clandestine, risky operation has successfully moved at least 6,000 of the satellite internet kits into the country. But one of the conditions that is helpful to overthrow a regime is having some kind of resistance group on the ground. And these US special operators that are on these borders have been embedded with Iranian Kurdish resistance groups. In fact, during the last protest, those resistance groups crossed over the border and killed Iranian guards. But they stopped short of going any further because, according to their commanders, they didn't have US air power overhead to support them. The Institute for the Study of War think tank reported that the Iranian regime's concern about cross-border Kurdish militant activity will likely cause the regime to divert resources to address this threat. Reporters spoke to US officials in the State Department who confirmed this covert action. But why would they do that? Why would they confirm this top secret information? What about OPSEC? The reason for publicly disclosing this is to send a message to resistance groups inside of Iran of continued US covert support. But the risks here are enormous.
Just owning one of the Starlink terminals is illegal and would get you thrown in a federal pound-me-in-the-ass Iranian prison for multiple years.
The Iranian regime,
especially when there's a blackout, any Starlink just basically lights up on their radar, like, oh, there's the Starlink. It's very easy to like chase after. So anybody who has that is directly at crosshairs.
Regime's internal security apparatus is a giant problem if you're a US war planner, because one of the goals of a US military strike would be to spark the resistance movement to overthrow the government from the inside. The strategy is that once the bombs start dropping, then protesters could take advantage of the chaos. But it's not an invincible apparatus here. This open source intelligence study looked at leaked internal documents from this facility, the Tharallah facility, that revealed everything about how it functions and revealed its weakest, most vulnerable points. This 80-page document outlines everything from their command structure to their leadership to each and every individual target that would need to be hit to take it out. Every headquarters location, what their responsibilities are, distribution of units, the tactics that they use. But how is
What videos are they watching when they go to take a... what clothes they're wearing, what their routines are, where they step, exactly at the precise moment where they sleep. Literally a diagram of everything.
America exploiting that weakness? Well, when the protests in Iran happened in 2026 in January, the US military didn't have all their ducks in a row for a decisive strike. But now, those ducks are being put in a row. Quack, quack.
Because the largest US military buildup since the Gulf War is currently underway. The 2 US aircraft carriers and hundreds of US fighter jets are now moving into position, and they're surrounding Iran, preparing for a decapitation strike. The leader of the Islamic Republic has tweeted in response, threatening to send these American warships to the bottom of the sea. The geopolitical equivalent of come at me, bro. Meanwhile, 25,000 American troops are now moving in to reinforce the Middle East, enough to make any E2 say who.
But what are they aiming at?
Tharallah Headquarters is...
I like how they think that America just spent $13 billion into an aircraft carrier, not to mention all the destroyers and submarines that it has it. All those billions into this, and they can just sink it. Like, what do you think that money is for? What you really think that doesn't have any kind of perfect defense in it, that you can't even touch it? Where do you think 13 billion went?
Is run by General Hosseini Najat. He has already ruthlessly been
Hossein Najat.
responsible for putting down 2 protests in the past, and he's a known enjoyer of licking boots. He's fast becoming the general in Iranian military that's best at killing other Iranians. If there were any ground campaign inside Iran, it would be undercover special operatives from the Mossad and from US Special Forces that would target Iran's key leadership. General Najat would be high up on that list, because he is the general in charge of how Iran tasks out their Basij militia. What is the Basij militia? Most people like myself have only ever heard of the infamous Iran's IRGC, but the Basij is actually way more important if you want to understand the country's system of internal oppression, because it is Iran's mass volunteer paramilitary force with a manpower estimated to be about 100,000 strong. They are the backbone of the regime's internal security reserve. They are called up in times of crisis, and they maintain control of the people through brutal violence. The Basij is
basically, if you're in America or any other democratic country like India, America, European countries, if you want to flex, you become rich. You try to become a millionaire, you try to become tech pro or something, so you have a BMW or Mercedes and you can flex. I'm guessing in Iran, if you want to flex, you join this militia, because that automatically gives you power over other people, so you can flex. So of course, like, yeah, okay, this is like volunteer. Yeah, there's too many volunteers now. That's what this militia is. What type of training do they have? That's the question here. Is this just militia because it's in the numbers, or do they get proper military training?
Is subordinate to the IRGC, who totally dominates them. Destroying or degrading this key unit would be very important. The first step in degrading them is mapping out the targets. We know that it was originally established in 1995 following unrest in the capital. That's actually when Ayatollah Ali Khamenei first started to increasingly rely on it to remain in power. By 2009, they had expanded massively, setting up 4 sub-headquarters. It's developed over the years through these multiple protests, becoming bigger and bigger, and gaining more and more importance, and more control is now routed to them in what are called red alert situations. They're created this special system of surveillance where they've doubled down on their coercion in off-the-books prisons where they interrogate people. And this has allowed them to quickly I'm
surprised China didn't give them their social credit system with proper cameras and everything. There you go. You can track everything there as well.
Iranian protest networks. Ultimately, they are then able to reassert control of the country time and time again. However, their locations are now closely monitored by US air campaign planners. Take note, one of these locations is in Nadir, another is in Quds, Fath, and Gadar, all located strategically throughout the city of Tehran. The air tasking order of US fighter bombers will prioritize these targets in their list. Precision strikes will aim to destroy these bases so they cannot coordinate. Here's a list of all the headquarters buildings and their locations mapped out, but it would be a challenge to knock out the network entirely, because intelligence reports indicate that since 2007, the IRGC has managed to decentralize by setting up these new provincial guard sites, as they're called, and there are now a total of 32 key guard posts that are tied to the 11 operational headquarters, including Tharallah. By spreading out further like this, it's allowed them to tighten control and add 11.
Yeah, that is a thing, right? Like, it's hard to target all of the locations, so they're basically spread out. So something smart is there at least. It's going to be somewhat hard to topple all of them down, right? Because it's literally spread out throughout the country.
Level of redundancy in case any location is hit. This is the kind of intelligence that will be handed to American and Israeli fighter pilots and bomber aircraft. To hit all these targets simultaneously may require massive sustained air.
Or we have 30 locations throughout the entire country, so you can't target us. America's like, but we have 30 missiles.
Campaign, because America now has a boatload of combat power that's moved into the region literally and figuratively. A total of 20 warships will be in the 5th Fleet now. The meme CENTCOM forever never dies. On top of that, the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, which just got done taking down another dictator in the Caribbean, is moving directly to the Middle East and is looking to add another notch on her belt, I've heard. Online flight trackers are now showing the arrival of more than 80 American fighter jets on their route from
48 F-16. I guess F-16 should be just used to take out drones, just like their machine guns alone. That would be very cheap. Hunt down these drones with planes. 48 is good enough. 12 F-22s. To me, that feels like an overkill. That many F-22s, do you really need that? Okay. 18 F-35s, why not? They both can work together. And E-3G sentries, okay. What about, like, obviously there are like growlers and everything, but those are on like carriers.
From Europe to reach a total of over 220 air.
This is on US bases, by the way. This does not count all the other planes that are on the carriers.
Aircraft in the region. US troop numbers are over 50,000. This outstanding graphic here shows all the capabilities of the US moved into theater, including hundreds of Tomahawk missiles that are in their inventory. This contingent would have a lot of targets that they would need to pound. According to this report, there are 23 IRGC Basij bases. Each is directly embedded within Tehran's municipal district, which means the risk of collateral damage is higher and the use of precision strikes would be required. The risk of hitting innocent people increases when they're located centrally in the city like this, which would be counterproductive. They have 2 overlapping bases that are concentrated in politically sensitive regions. These commands functions basically as the hubs that protect the entire regime. But it gets more complicated when trying to plan the strike out, because in total there are actually 3,000 of these decentralized militia Basij neighborhood bases, which are basically just checkpoints everywhere that exist throughout Tehran's 375 neighborhoods. We can see here visually how this city is divided into areas of responsibility for them. These are the units that conduct the checkpoints on roads to prevent protesters from having full mobility. The target list becomes overwhelming quickly, we can see. And that's why it's always a good idea to not go it alone when you're undertaking something big and scary like regime change. America's allies in the Israeli Air Force would likely be heavily involved in any attack. There are 2 key things to note here, I think. All of these fighters are now freed in Israel from having to worry about a second strike from Hezbollah like would have happened in the past, because Hezbollah has been heavily degraded. And now that Syria's al-Assad has fallen, this has opened up this new corridor, a wide open gap for Israeli fighter jets to follow through, which they've recently exploited in their strikes against Iran. They operate more than 200 combat aircraft, so we're talking about a combined over 400 fighter jets. Now, a Delta Force decapitation raid like the one in Venezuela is theoretically possible. It would be much more difficult because Caracas was conveniently located just 12 miles offshore. In this case, helicopters would have to travel from the borders over 500 miles across land.
Yeah, Iran is not Venezuela, so it's not going to be like that. Yeah, you probably need a longer thing and longer attack plan and, I don't know, more laid out plan to like capture anyone if you want. Like, I don't think capturing someone would be the objective. They would tackle it a bit differently.
inside of Iran, which makes them a vulnerable target, before reaching the city of Tehran, where the country's key leadership is located. They could deploy discombobulators along the way, but that's a difficult task. The next biggest target for toppling Iran's regime is
throw it from space. There you go. Everybody drops down, grabbing that. Oh my God, the sonic attack.
their missile inventory. This needs to go. In the past 2 years, it's been reduced, you might not know this, by about half. There's only 1,200 missiles remaining in Iran after strikes on their storage depots. And an estimated only 100 launchers still remain that can even fire those missiles. They've greatly reduced the volume of fire there, and that number is down from 480 in the past. 2/3 of Iran's firing capacity was totally destroyed. The threat, while not completely gone, is heavily diminished. But it's interesting to note that this is Iran's priority, right? Because recent satellite images that I've seen showed that Iran has been busy at work reinforcing these missile bases. Intelligence officials say Iran has quickly repaired about a dozen of the ballistic missile sites that were totally KO'd in airstrikes last year. They've been racing to rebuild these instead of the nuclear facility, because it's interesting to note that so far there's only been limited fixes to the nuclear sites that the United States smashed. It also appears that the bunker buster...
Okay, it is surprising to me that they're rebuilding where they were. Like, okay, your enemy knows where these sites are. You want to rebuild it there so they can attack again? What are you doing? I don't know, try to build it somewhere else?
bombs were effective, because the satellite image evidence shows that the nuclear facilities in Iran are currently inoperative and are just largely empty. The western Iran hosts some of the highest...
I mean, to be fair, if a bunker buster drops and collapses a mountain, how do you repair it that easily? It's going to take much more effort to repair that.
Density of ballistic missile infrastructure that would need to be hit. This includes the Imam Ali missile base and the Kermanshah missile garrison and the centrally located Samnan missile complex. Several midnight hammers would need to be dropped on them, and it would take some inventory of tomahawks to totally destroy them. Destroying the missile systems located in the south is key to mission success, because this is within range of the Gulf shipping lanes. This is where Iran exercises control of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has a fleet of fast attack boats that they used to temporarily close part of the strait recently, where they also have threatened to lay sea mines through here. This was done to remind America of the leverage that they have on the transit route. But doing this, shutting this down, would be the nuclear option, no pun intended, because it would shut off about 20% of the world's oil supply, and their allies in China would be pretty pissed off about that. Why is the US implementing a strategy to topple Iran? What is there really to gain here? It would totally reshape the global balance of power across the world, because China gets a combined 20% of their oil from Venezuela and Iran. If America gained control over both these sources of oil, it would give them a strategic advantage over China. This is why part of the negotiation is that the US wants Iran to move away from China as an ally. The aftermath is impossible for me to predict anyway. It's unlikely.
Look, I'm surprised China is not point blank saying it like this is a red line and US better not close it, or some kind of a threat like that, if it's security that is at stake for China. If a lot of oil resources are literally controlled by USA that China needs, isn't that a security risk for China? Isn't this time to China to flex at certain level, like USA, don't do this, otherwise I'll have to enter the conflict or something? I'm surprised they're not saying anything.
But it could lead to the former Shah's son being put into power, who would be very, very friendly to the United States, or the country could devolve into some kind of civil war like in Libya, God forbid what happened in Syria and Yemen, causing chaos and instability which would spill over into neighboring nations, and then terrorist organizations would rise in the vacuum of power. Victory for the Islamic Republic of Iran, once a war were to start, would be to simply survive it. The US and Israel, though, could claim victory conditions.
That is a worst case scenario. There are things like if US does a big ass campaign, even put boats for some reason in Iran because it's taken too long, and somehow regime still survives and USA eventually does have to move out because they can't just stay there. If that happens, Iran will just claim victory, like we survived, so we were victorious, right? People say America has never won a war since World War II because of shit like this. How do you win in Afghanistan? US always like crosses everything, but people somehow survive and comes out. Oh, look at that, they lost. Same thing every other wars, like whatever they fought, right? From Korea to whatever, right? How do you win that? right? Somehow something survives. Oh, by the way, US are lost. This could be similar thing. US crosses everything, but somehow regime hides and survives. When US are lost, they come back. Oh, look at that, we won.
Simply by saying that they degraded Iran's missile abilities, but really in reality anything short of toppling Iran's government once a war starts would not have been worth the cost unless they go all the way full send regime change. Or the regime could collapse and be replaced by martial law, or something else that I haven't even thought of could happen. To put that into scale, this gigantic military deployment is super expensive. Maintaining forward deployed units like this burns through resources, but it makes them some of the best leverage during negotiations that you could have. The risks are higher for them though, because launching these aircraft from carriers would put them within range of some of the first direct ballistic missiles that would target aircraft carriers in history. You might say there are other vectors of attack, and it's true US forces are located at 19 major bases here, but a lot of people don't realize that they're not allowed to attack into Iran from those bases. They're only authorized to run defensive interception of
Again, who's gonna stop them? Yeah, okay, Allah is gonna be pissed, but America would just say like, shut the fuck up, we'll figure this out later. My image is bigger at stake here, so I'm not gonna really worry about pissing you off.
incoming missiles. This is due to legal constraints, with the host countries not being down to clown, not cool with getting involved in another one of America's classic regime change wars. Some are skeptical of the chances of war, but open source troop movements now show that THAAD and Patriot launchers, these air defense systems, are being moved into and deployed into the region. It's become clear that hostilities are more and more likely because pulling those systems off other locations reduces strengths elsewhere, like in the Pacific, so that wouldn't be done for nothing. It's interesting to note that the US military doesn't have enough air defense to be everywhere all at once. It's moved around, and kind of a game of musical chairs is played with them to be put into the place where
Yeah, that is all of it though. Every other country has similar problems. Like, you can't be everywhere all the time. Anyone that says they have like perfect dome, like Iron Dome style defenses, is like very specific, strategically placed things. You can't defend everything all the time. You have to take a risk.
they're needed most. I don't know if that analogy works. What we know is that the collapse of Iran's government is the final missing piece for the neocons, the final missing piece in the Middle East puzzle for American interests. Maybe spreading democracy wasn't the goal all along. Maybe it's not what the US wanted. Maybe it didn't matter if you're a dictator or not, so long as you're on America's side.
I mean, that is obvious thing. Like, that's been the case since forever, right? In the end of the day, like America, if America somehow topples Iran, that would be basically biggest check into Trump's, like, oh, I did this list. Because for decades, the regime is there. And imagine if Trump does that.
This video, it's the untold story of how Jeffrey Epstein got rich smuggling weapons for the CIA and became an international arms smuggler and sent a bunch of weapons to Iran over.
Oh, okay. He made that. All right, sure, why not? Yeah. See, I was saying that about Epstein in certain videos. Like, he's involved with a lot of Israeli and Mossad element. Maybe this is some like James Bond level shit is happening with espionage and all that. And maybe I'm right. Look at that. There's a proper video about it. Cappy made it. Yeah, so I don't know, like a lot of Tharallah Patriots there. I don't think carriers have to worry about anything. Aegis, Tharallah Patriot, all of it's there. What missile is going to pass through that? So yeah, it's going to be interesting what happens next. Right, well, if you like my next channel, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.